Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, welcome back to After Maghrib. This week we have a really interesting episode. In some ways explosive, in some ways contemplative, but we're going to be talking about different alternative views, some may say deviations, that you may find in modern day Islam. Now, these are opinions which are held sometimes by scholars or by groups. Some would describe themselves as Shi'i, some may not. Some may say they follow an alternative path, a different mindset. But what we're going to do is we're going to put these points of view forward to what we would believe is a mainstream Usuli, Imami, 12 scholar, and see what his points of view are. So a couple of disclaimers before we get into it. The first thing is that we are just podcast hosts and we're not scholars. So part of that means that our responsibility is to engage with our respected guest, to ask him questions, and also at times to play maybe a slight devil's advocate role, of course, while trying to maintain our decorum and respect for the speaker, as we do have a lot of respect for him. But also, secondly, to encourage you at home to go home and research, to find truth, to find haqq, because ultimately it's our own personal beliefs which are always on the line. We are always hearing different points of view on social media, in centers, and our responsibility is to have complete conviction, iman and yaqeen in what we believe in, such that when we are faced with different points of views, with arguments from friends, from families, from peers, we know what to say. We know how to defend ourselves and our religious belief system as well. So some of these, brothers and sisters, we are going to, just to kind of tease you, inshallah, so you can stay till the end of the episode, we're going to be talking about things like the birth of Imam Mahdi. Does he even exist? If he does exist, where is he and what benefit is he to us? The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, including our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, were they error-free in reality, or did they, for example, miss a prayer at times? Did they ever make mistakes? Were they just righteous scholars? Our Hawza institutions, our Muraja, are they free from sin, or do they make errors? Or in some cases, are they bad people themselves? These are just a few of the things we're going to talk about and put forward to our respected guest. Before we introduce him, it gives me great honor, as always, to be joined by my dear brother, Sayyid Ali Radawi. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmah.
How are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah, how are you keeping?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. These are, of course, still days of mourning,
Sahih.
Days of commemoration, and it's an important opportunity for us to continue to search for knowledge and to continue to learn from the story of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, while we are still in these blessed and sorrowful days.
Ahsant, and I think we owe it to them. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be on the path that's haqq, and not to be confused in this world of confusion. You mentioned so many discussion points that inshallah we'll get into, and I'm not exposed to half of these things, so I need to be aware of what's happening, what's been spreading around certain communities within, I'm hearing between friends as well, so I just need to be careful about myself, about my family, and those that I love close around.
Of course,
I'm
absolutely.
looking forward.
And joining us, brothers and sisters, is not someone who is unfamiliar to you. It's someone who's been on the After Maghrib podcast before and is always highly requested, and the very respected Sayyid Mahdi Modarresi. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for coming back to After Maghrib.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. It's a great podcast and program that apparently is now one of the most popular Shia Islamic podcast anywhere in the world, so
Inshallah.
kudos to you both, mashallah.
Thank you so much.
You've done a great job.
We hope it's of benefit, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah,
Inshallah. And it's
inshallah.
people such as yourselves who allow it to be of benefit.
Inshallah. By the way, I love the fact that you shake hands every time you introduce the podcast, as if like you haven't seen each other for a few months, but it's nice. It's
More like
nice
a few minutes, yeah.
It's a genuine handshake.
Yeah, I was looking for signs of like not being genuine, but no, it really is pretty authentic.
It's just love, it's pure love.
Alhamdulillah.
Habibi said, how's your time been in London? I know this is not your first or second, it's probably the 50th time in London.
Wonderful. No, the thing about London for me is that it's become like a home away from home.
Yeah.
I know so many people, and I really enjoy the community, the vibes. Obviously, I'm not talking about London as a city, but London as a host for a wonderful community of believers who, especially in Muharram, they really shine. And so it's one of my favorite places to go to. So yeah, it's wonderful to be back.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I highly encourage anyone at home to check out the Sayyid's series that he's done both in the first Ashra and the second online. It's been really beneficial, and alhamdulillah we had the honor to attend a few of the majalis. Sayyidina, I know this is something which is a passionate topic to many. Now, people who are listening at home will fall in different sides of the epistemological spectrum. Some will be more spiritual, some will be more tafkiki, you could say, more akhbari or more usuli, but different people have different points of view. I think maybe to kick off, a question about how to approach knowledge and where we gain knowledge from. As members of the community, where should we be seeking knowledge, and who should we be seeking that knowledge from?
Wow, a very pivotal question, which I think requires a dense response. But I'll do my best, and if I go over the time limit allocated to this question, do let me know. But essentially, the way I would approach this would be to ask the question of what is the most important thing for us as human beings living through this transient life. And because we are Muslim, we also believe in the afterlife. We believe that this life is only a bridge that connects two different worlds in which we are being tested, and we have to pass that test. What would be the most important thing for us, given our position? And the answer is guidance and knowledge, right? Everything else can take a back seat. I mean, people come in different shapes and sizes, different ethnicities, different nationalities, different families, different, socioeconomic levels. But at the end of the day, if the purpose of our life in this world is to seek God and satisfy Him and make Him pleased with us, then the question that follows from that is, well, how? Right. And the how has been the subject of debate by, millions of scholars and godly men, ungodly men, religious leaders, philosophers, and whatnot for eons. So how we derive that knowledge becomes absolutely critical to our very survival in the next life, right, if not this one. Mm-hmm. So whatever happens here is ultimately temporary, and so it doesn't really matter that much. It's what happens to me in the next life. And if I get it wrong, then this is not just a grave risk, but it could determine whether or not I go to heaven or hell. Mm. So where do we derive knowledge? I think the prophets, whose existence and whose connection with God we acknowledge, and it's part of our faith to accept not just our prophet, but all the previous revelations as well. They've all been consistent on this, that ultimately you have to follow the prophet's guidance, and anything else, no matter how enticing, no matter how interesting, is not going to lead you toward salvation. So essentially what we need is revelation. And our beliefs, our values have to be based on revelation and grounded in the teachings of these prophets and apostles. Other aspects of our lives, we could refer to specialists in, whatever field that we happen to need. If I fall sick, I should go to the doctor. Yeah. And, doctors and other professionals in society, at least now, there is a mechanism by which they get accredited and they get certified, and they have to demonstrate their knowledge and expertise in that field. Yeah. But when it comes to religious knowledge, you don't have a very clear definition of what accreditation means. So we believe in God, we follow Him. Because of that, we believe in the prophets and we follow them. Then the next question is, well, what's our conduit to the prophets? And how do we know what the prophet said? And so, of course, we could delve into topics like hadith and the transmission of hadith and authenticity and whatnot. But I want to give like a broader response to that. And it lies in a hadith of Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam, in which the Imam, and there's context to it, but I think that's irrelevant for the purpose of our discussion. The Imam says to someone, one of his companions, and this is in one of the most authentic books compiled by Shaykh al-Saduq, specifically about the ahadith of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. The Imam says, "Man istama'a ila natiqin faqad abadah." Whoever listens to a speaker, they are worshipping the speaker. Or perhaps the meaning is they're worshipping the subject matter that the speaker is presenting them with.
Right.
And worship here means
they're taking it as gospel. Is that what you
exactly.
mean? Okay.
They will obey what they've been told because they take it as the gospel truth. They take it as revelation. They take it as something that they must follow. So the Imam then goes on to say, فَإِنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ عَنِ اللَّهِ. If that person is speaking with knowledge derived from revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. Then that person is worshipping God. وَإِنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ عَنِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَقَدْ عَبَدَ الشَّيْطَانِ. And if the speaker is motivated by desire and temptation, and shaitan is the one feeding him the information, then that's what I'm worshipping. So we have to be really, really careful who we take our knowledge from. And then the Imam goes on to explain how you need to discern and distinguish between a righteous speaker and someone who is not. And so I think on a practical level, this is something that we need to keep in mind, and not just in the back of our minds, but really at the very forefront when choosing who we listen to, who we learn from, whose classes do we attend, and whose group do we become a member of.
Right.
Is this person someone who's bringing me closer to God or away from God? And that usually isn't a very difficult thing to figure out. But for some people who are perhaps simple-minded or don't put in the effort or don't have the metrics to kind of measure whether this person is truthful or not, it becomes really confusing for them.
Okay, all right. I think that sounds good. With your permission, Said, we're going to start throwing some topics at you, and I think a lot of these will be known or at least familiar to some at home who have kind of been engaging on online discourse, who have been seeing lectures about certain topics, who have been hearing speakers come forward with alternative opinions. Some of these are new age topics, and some have been debated since the beginning of the school of thought. Said, and I know we've discussed this kind of behind the scenes, but one of these is YouTube groups which have appeared, groups which have a Bathiya-like mentality, who sympathize, for example, with the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and of course bring down maybe the status of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam as per the mainstream Shia point of view. What do you reckon?
No, that's very true, because there is this rise of, I think, what is known as ulama al-abrar, this view, this concept, this idea, and it's being presented by people who a normal Shia listening will believe they represent the madhab of Ahlul Bayt. They don't see any differences. They don't read between the lines. They just hear, sounds good, sounds like they have a point. But what's the reality? Because I can be confused, say it, and I'm going to say it like this. I'm born as a Shia, alhamdulillah. I was raised a Shia. I have the opportunity to spend time with Shia scholars. I have the opportunity to, I would say, the blessing, not to be misguided. And we believe on haqq, and inshallah we'll remain on haqq and die on haqq. But there comes a time where we grow up, we are exposed to new ideas, we are exposed to different speakers, different works, different theories, if I can say, at times. And one of them is, okay, we've grown up knowing our Imams are ma'soom. We've grown up knowing our Imams are hujjaj of God on this earth. We've grown up that they are referees in three, they are divinely connected to Allah, they represent the message of Islam, they represent Rasulullah. But now we're being told they're just any righteous scholar. How do I, as a Shia, make sure that I'm not confused by this? Because I know friends that are discussing this and saying, maybe that's right. How do I guide them and ensure I protect myself and those listening at home that we don't fall trapped to this nonsense? And I see it as nonsense because you can't be Shia if you don't believe that they are muftarad al-ta'a, if they're not infallible. Like, these are core, principal, foundational elements for a 12 Shia.
Is it, and sorry, just to add, is that actually something which is outside of the fold of Tashayyu'? So if I was to say, for example, the Imams were not infallible. The Imams were just righteous scholars. Top scholars, righteous, but not infallible. Does that take me outside of the fold of Shi'ism?
Absolutely. The reason for that is one of the foundational tenets of our faith is that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt were appointed by God, number one. And number two, it is binding upon us to obey their every command. If you say that they were mere scholars, albeit high-ranking, highly knowledgeable, astute in every way, then it removes them from being sort of in a position where you must obey them. Must obey them, right? Muftaradu ta'a, as you put it.
Authority.
Yeah. So if you don't obey them, you'll go to hell, essentially. If you don't obey them, you've disobeyed God. If you say they were mere scholars and take away infallibility or the fact that they were inerrant, what happens is, if they're not infallible, it means that at least some of their instructions could be fallible and therefore wrong. And so how could it simultaneously be that I must follow them, but that some of their instructions are wrong? It just doesn't add up. Logically speaking, it's wrong.
Okay.
But going back to the main question, which is that we see the rise of tiny fringe groups. Like, let's not give them any more credit than they deserve. They like to think that they are gaining a lot of ground and converting, thousands of souls and whatnot. But the reality is, we know who they are. You could see their WhatsApp groups and you could see their YouTube channel and you can see that it's like, it's a couple of dozen here or there. But for me, the reason I feel obligated to respond is, number one, it's a falsehood, and a falsehood requires a response. And secondly, because every single soul matters. And I don't want to see, just like, if I had a friend who was like influenced by these people, I wouldn't want my friend to be swept away by this kind of nonsense. And so to address the main problem, I think we need to look at it like this. First of all, this whole Cartesian approach of trying to start with doubt and then develop my epistemology based on that is definitely wrong. If you look at the Quran, if you look at the Hadith, if you look at in fact, by the mere faculty of intellect and rational thinking, we know that people don't base their lives and their epistemological system of beliefs on doubt. They build it on certainty. Right. You start with a solid bedrock, and then you build on that. Yeah. If you start with doubt, then you're, soon enough, you're going to doubt everything, right? And we've seen people like that. So start with the certainties. The Quran speaks about the concept of muhkam and mutashabih, for example, right? The muhkam is the definitive, the clear, the statements or the verses in the Quran which are so transparent. Pretty much anyone can understand them if they have a basic level of Arabic comprehension. If you come across a verse that is allegorical, that can have multiple meanings, that might be a little confusing, then what you do is you refer to the allegorical verse back to the definitive one. So you build on the definitive verse, on that solid bedrock, and then you bring this verse, and what it does oftentimes is that it takes away much of the confusion. It may not clarify the meaning of the verse definitively, but at the very least, it'll remove the areas of, or at least, many parts of the confusion that you had when you first read the allegorical verse. And there are many examples of that. I don't want to get into it, but let's apply this principle to our beliefs. So our beliefs are based on the oneness and the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we get to the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, given his wisdom, given his knowledge, given his sense of purpose, for lack of a better term, in creating the universe, surely there must be purpose for my life. And that purpose should be communicated to me, right? I need to know what I'm supposed to do. I need to know how to reach my full potential and do the right thing. So prophets come into play, and then the prophets then have individuals that are appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once again, because the role they play is more or less the same as the role of the prophets, minus the revelation, minus that direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But essentially what they're designed to do, these successors, the imams, is that they provide a practical application for the teachings of those prophets and guide the nation and ensure that the nation doesn't go astray. So if we apply this principle, what about the imams of the Ahlul Bayt? Are they infallible? Are they prone to error? Do they forget? And so on. And the response of Shi'i scholars for the last 14 centuries is that there's no question, and I'm speaking about mainstream Shi'i scholars, there might have been a few fringe elements here and there, because ultimately you have fake imposters throughout the ages. I mean, the fact that we have a bunch of clowns today doesn't mean that this is a new phenomenon. Like, it's been around for a long time.
Can I ask, sorry, just on that, there are these, like, let's be real, a lot of the times these points of views comes from people with an academic background, or those who have studied, or sons of scholars, or whatever it may be. And these people, they find their beliefs based off something tangible, which they can use as a basis for that deviation, as some may call it. Now, for example, we've seen academic works in Iran which push ulama al-abrar. We've seen hadith in different books which say that, for example, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there are at least 9 narrations that he missed Salatul Fajr. Or, for example, Ibn Abi Ya'fur, who debated Mu'alla bin Khunais at the time of Imam al-Sadiq, and you may say that in that narration he devalued or lowered the maqam of the imam, and the imam accepted it. Or, for example, if I can add just one more, Sayyidina, in the concept of ilm al-ghaib, that the imam, let's make it contemporary, right? So we're in the season of Muharram and Safar. If Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had ilm al-ghaib, why would he send Muslim ibn Aqil to Kufa? Why would he know? Why would he go tell him to go and scout the area if he knew what was to come, right? Can I speak to Imam al-Mahdi? If I can speak to Imam al-Mahdi now, why couldn't Muslims speak to Imam al-Hussein then and tell him about the dangers to come? These are all arguments which are put forward and posed.
Okay.
That's a lot, I know. I've
a lot of points to address there. So if I do forget to address any of them, to remind me. But just taking a step back for a moment, I think it's critical that we employ the concept of mutashabih being sort of evaluated by and clarified by the muhkam. And so we have a muhkam, we have a lot of muhkamat, but one of them is إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. This verse is as clear as it gets. I mean, the power in the entirety of the power of the Arabic language has been employed to explicitly imply that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt are infallible. There's no question about it. إنما أداة حصر يريد الله. Allah wants to. وأمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. ليه? Again, للتوكيد. It's to emphasize something. يذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم. Allah has already said that He wants to remove impurities from you. But once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reiterates, وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ. Then He reiterates a third time, تَطْهِيرًا. So all of this put together, if this doesn't suggest infallibility, I don't know what does. And surely we know that this verse is not talking about physical impurities, because physical impurities come in contact with prophets and messengers all the time. Right? There's blood, for example, in any battle, and that blood is physically impure. So God isn't speaking about physical impurities. or ritual impurities. He's speaking about what? Spiritual impurities, which are sins. Otherwise, what are spiritual impurities? Obviously, we're talking about sin. Now, all of this still doesn't prove the infallibility of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam.
But could they not be infallible? Sorry to interrupt you, said, but could they not be infallible purely on theology and aqaid and preaching? The
That's not
of religion.
what the verse is saying. The verse is absolute. It's general. It's speaking عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. So any and all sins, right? And although forgetfulness is not a sin, but is it not an impurity?
Yes,
like for someone who was forgetful, wouldn't you think that's a flaw?
It's a blemish. Yeah.
It's a blemish, right? That's number one. Number two, look, broadly speaking, once again, I think exaggeration, or ghulu, as it's commonly referred to, is the other side of the coin of taqsir. And so my personal belief is that many of the people who fall into taqsir, meaning that they
take away from
they reduce the rank of the Ahlul Bayt, and they deny and reject some of their attributes and features and whatnot, is a reaction to ghulu. That's why you find more of these two extremes in certain societies than others.
Right.
The more you have ghulu, the more you're going to have people who engage in taqsir. And that's not necessarily the case across the board. So some countries where there's more of a balance, where the view is more mainstream, it's more sort of in line with the truth of the matter and the reality of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, you don't have these two extremes.
Right.
But in some societies, and I don't think we need to name names, but there are communities and societies out there which suffer from one of these two, which inevitably leads to the other emerging as well.
As a reaction.
As a reaction to it, right? So if you grew up in a community, for example, where all you heard was like fada'il and miracles and things like that, which kind of start to verge into ghulu, or you assume that this is a form of ghulu, you're going to develop an autoimmune disorder in your brain that causes you to go to the other end of the extreme.
Right.
So that's kind of my sort of social analytical view of why we have these things. But getting back to a reference that you both brought up, which is ulama abrar. So I think it's important that we address this, because it's funny how easy it is to dismiss this entire theory. So the term comes from a hadith where al-Mu'alla ibn Khunais and one of his friends, Ibn Abi Ya'fur, at the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, they get into a debate. And the debate starts off like this. One says to the other that al-ulama'u anbiya. Al-awsiya'u anbiya.
Yeah.
The successors are prophets. Now, just stopping here for a second, which successors? Who are we talking about? Because the successors of many of the previous prophets were, in fact, prophets themselves. So, in a way, the point he's making is not entirely wrong, right? Unless you try to apply it to the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, who have consistently said that we are not prophets. Rasulullah himself has said he's the seal of the prophets, he's the final messenger, and he has said famously to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, anta minni bimanzilati Harun min Musa. You are to me like the rank or station of Harun to Musa, illa annahu la nabiyya ba'di, except that there is no prophet after me. So, if you apply this principle to all of the successors, including the Imams, it becomes problematic. Otherwise, by itself, it's kind of factual. The other says to him, no. Al-awsiya'u ulama'u abrar. They're not prophets. They are righteous, godly, knowledgeable scholars. Ulama, scholars. Abrar, good people, right? And so some people have tried to kind of capture this and say that, oh, this means that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt are not divinely appointed leaders for humanity. Rather, they're righteous scholars, really good people. We'll respect them, but don't give them more than they deserve. So what happens is they come to an agreement that we should go and consult Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. We might as well, right? So they go to the Imam. The hadith actually says, and I have it right here actually, I looked it up. It says that when they went, so it was Ibn Abi Ya'fur who said, Al-Awsiya'u ulama abrar atqiya. Mu'alla ibn Khunais said, Al-Awsiya'u anbiya. So when they went to see the Imam, قال فلما استقر مجلسهما. The narrator of the hadith says that when they sat down, they settled. بدأهما أبو عبد الله. The Imam initiated the conversation, addressing the two of them. فقال يا أبا عبد الله. Aba Abdullah is in reference to Mu'alla ibn Khunais. That was his kunya. أبرأ ممن قال إنا أنبياء. I seek refuge, meaning in Allah, from those people who say we are prophets. Because there were people who would make this claim, Abu al-Khattab and others, they made claims similar to these. Now, those who have tried to capitalize on this hadith and use it to their advantage, they miss a key point. If the Imams are, obviously, by the way, the Imam didn't really elaborate much. He simply said, we're not prophets.
Right.
Did he say that we are merely righteous scholars? No. He simply rejected one of the sides of the argument.
Did he not go further than that and address the ulama al-abrar comment?
No, he didn't. Okay. Number one, the Imam didn't adopt the opposing view. He simply rejected this one.
Right. Okay.
Number two, and more importantly, if the Imams are simply righteous, godly, pious scholars and nothing more, how did the Imam what they were talking about to begin with? Because the hadith specifically says, when they sat down, the Imam bada'ahuma.
Started talking to them.
He initiated the conversation and said something that proved the Imam knew what they were talking about. Yeah. They weren't in front of him, they were outside, they were somewhere else. They came, which debunks the whole theory, completely dismantles it. And it proves that the Imam has what? Knowledge of the unseen. Knowledge of a conversation between two people in a private setting, but the Imam knew all about it. How? So in a way, the Imam is rejecting the notion that they are prophets, but at the same time, he's not adopting the idea that we are merely righteous scholars. They have knowledge of the unseen. They were divinely appointed. As I said, the divine appointment of the Imams is the very foundation of our faith. If someone rejects that, they're rejecting Amir al-Mu'mineen being appointed as the successor of Rasulullah, which is proved and established by verses in the Quran, as well as the hadith corpus, as well as Hadith al-Ghadir and others. If you reject the divine appointment of the Imams, you're absolutely not a Shia. You can call yourself whatever you want.
So I feel like this whole idea of ulama al-abrar is like initiated somewhere or was inspired by Sunni Islam, for example. Don't they use a similar argument?
Exactly, the Sunnis say this. The Sunni community views the Ahlul Bayt as what?
Just
as really good people, righteous, pious, knowledgeable, right?
They put them in the same brackets as the Abu Hanifa and so on for that reason.
Yeah. So basically, the disagreement between the two major sects within Islam is about the obedience of the Ahlul Bayt, and that it's binding, it is obligatory, and there's no ifs or buts about it. If you remove this, I don't know what you are.
So just kind of as a little breather for those at home, because we've got so many things to talk about, and I think we could spend a few hours just on this. I have a lot of questions about ilm al-ghayb and ilm al-ghayb and a lot of other stuff, but I think for the sake of
by the way, can I say one more thing?
Yes, bismillah.
Just to sort of wrap up the point about ulama al-abrar.
Sorry, if you could also mention that Imam al-Hussein and Muslim thing and the communication with the Imam.
Right, sure. So one more point I want to mention is that a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, this fringe group started, saying stuff like that and trying to push the ulama abrar narrative. And at the time, I responded to them in a series of videos called Debunking Doubt. And I remember towards the end, so maybe it was like episode 7 or 6, I brought up the hadith and I addressed this point, and I'm like, how did the Imam know then? If he's simply a righteous scholar, which makes him pretty much like you and I, or any of the ulama that we have, who don't have knowledge of the unseen.
Right.
And the group and its leader never responded to this. They've churned out dozens of videos since then, right?
Yeah.
Some of them defamatory, derogatory, absolutely disgusting in the language they use against not just me, but like senior ulama and maraja. But they've avoided addressing this specific point because they have no answer. As for Imam al-Hussein sending Muslim ibn Aqil, I mean, that's like saying, why did God send all these prophets who ended up getting killed by their people? I mean, we don't question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or his vicegerents. See, once you establish the Imams as being divinely appointed, you don't subject them to any questioning. You know that their every action is guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a knowledge that's been given to them by Allah through the Prophet. End of discussion. Otherwise, this was the problem with so many Muslims in the time of Imam al-Hasan and later Imam al-Hussein. When Imam al-Hasan signed the truce with Muawiyah, how did most people around him react to that? They were like, how could you do this? Muawiyah, his people, these are treacherous, these are, people who don't subscribe to religion, they are the worst forms of evil.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
How could you sign a truce with them? And Imam al-Hasan had to remind each and every single one of them, haven't you heard Rasulullah saying, Al-Hasan wal-Husayn imaman qama aw qa'ada? We are imams, meaning divinely appointed leaders, whether we choose to rise or we choose to not rise and sit it out and sign a treaty or whatever it is, right? You must obey them. You must follow them. And then later, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, shockingly enough, when the Imam tried to rise, it was the same group of people who were like, why are you doing this? You're going to get yourself killed and whatnot. Because you can make the same argument about Imam al-Hussein and why he chose to go towards Kufa, salamullahi alayh, when he knew. And I've made this argument in many of my talks when I say that you think the people who advised Imam al-Hussein not to go to Karbala, you think they were smarter than Imam al-Hussein? You think they knew something Imam al-Hussein didn't know? Of course he knew. He knew this was going to end in the way that it did. In fact, he openly spoke about it. Right? He said, كأني بأوصالي تقطعها عسلان الفلوات بين النواويس وكربلاء. I can see my flesh being dismembered by the wolves of the desert at this specific location. وَمَا أَوْلَهَنِي إِلَىٰ أَسْلَافِي. I am so eager to meet my predecessors and my ancestors. اشتياق يعقوب إلى يوسف. The Imam knew. The Imam said that whoever joins me is going to get killed. So he knew all of that. And he knew what would happen to Muslim ibn Aqil. It was a mission he was on, and it had to happen in exactly the same way that it did, because it was part of God's divine plan.
Okay.
Sayyid, if I can just ask, there is also now a new, thing being pushed, a new narrative that's also coming in, is that there's now doubt that the Imam of our time, may Allah hasten his reappearance, is even born. We've come across certain mouthpieces that speak on behalf of this Ahmad al-Khatib, who's written a book and dismissing the hadith that say the Imam was born, such as the one with say the Hakima and the likes, and he claims that he uses Rijal and using, say the Al-Khoi and things like this to back his opinion that the Imam does not exist. How do we counter that? For me, when I read it, as someone who, as I said in the beginning, I'm Shi'i, alhamdulillah, I've been told what's right, what's wrong, I've done research, what to ensure, what's my foundations, what's the core principle of not, being misled to these things. For me, I would say the simple hadith of the one who dies without knowing the Imam of his time dies a death one that's considered ignorant. That's on a basic level. But how do we respond to these people who are really muddying the waters for the Shia layman out there?
I especially like how you ended that question. They're muddying the waters. They're trying to confuse the masses.
Yeah.
Because if they were looking for the truth, they'd know that there's not a morsel of truth in their arguments. We know the Imam was born based on eyewitness testimonies of people who were invited by Imam al-Hasan al-Askari salamullahi alayh to meet the Imam. You mentioned Sayyidah Hakima, for example. That's one hadith that is from inside the house of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. And you can debate whether or not that's authentic, but if you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the truth is so clear. It's clear as daylight. We have dozens upon dozens of people who at various different points in the 5 years before the Imam went into occultation, who came, and Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam would say, this is your Imam after me, this is my son, look at his facial features, look at what he looks like. On some occasions the Imam would give Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif, for example, would give one of them a ring, and then later on would send after him, because he got a little confused, because Ja'far, his uncle, claimed to be the Imam, and he would say, bring the ring back which I gave you, and he would then be taken to meet the Imam during the occultation. Dozens of testimonies. And that's still not enough. I mean, honestly, anyone who denies the birth of the Imam, I would say to them, I don't have 1/100th the evidence that I have about the birth of Imam al-Mahdi, about you being your father's son. And yet, for some reason, I'm expected to just accept that you're your father's son, that you are of a legitimate birth. Fine, I mean, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But seriously, with all of the testimonies, with all of those ahadith, many of which are absolutely authentic, even according to the strictest Rijali methodology. I mean, you mentioned Sayyid al-Khoi, for example. I think it's hilarious that they use Sayyid al-Khoi's methodology to dismiss all of these ahadith, and yet Sayyid al-Khoi himself believed in the Imam or not.
But I think the issue is not that Sayyid al-Khoi didn't believe the Imam existed, but that the methodology, the Rijali methodology used by Sayyid al-Khoi cannot prove indefinitely that the Imam 100% was born. Not that he most likely was born, but it couldn't definitely be proved. And I think other things as well, which some of these people use, is, for example, we know Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a hadith about the 12 leaders after him. We've seen all of the Imams mention about the coming of the Imam al-Mahdi, Imam al-Sadiq. How many times we've seen even Imam al-Askari, the father of the Imam. Despite all of that, the majority of the Shia at the time did follow Ja'far al-Kadhab. And if people were still following Ja'far al-Kadhab, knowing that the Imam's going into occultation, was it truly known? Was it truly understood by the Shia, even in an underground network or even in a private and an intimate environment? Did people actually genuinely believe it if they did follow someone else who was from the family of the Imams?
Okay. First of all, we know 1,000% that Imam al-Mahdi was born based on those testimonies of incredibly pious and truthful and good companions who had demonstrated their faith and devotion to Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam time and time again. And that should be more than enough. If I have two people saying that the Imam was born, that would be more than enough for me, let alone dozens, let alone almost 50 people who actually came and said, we saw him, we witnessed him, we saw the boy when he was young, and Imam al-Hasan al-Askari presented him to us. That's number one. Number two, the fact that some people follow Ja'far al-Kadhab proves absolutely nothing. That's like saying, why is it, if God's existence is so clear, why is it that we have so many atheists in the world? Of course there are going to be people who either out of ignorance or out of sheer, arrogance are going to reject the truth. That's number one. Number two, you need to remember that in the time of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam himself, the Imam had to practice taqiyya. That's why the birth of Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif, had to be concealed.
Hidden, yeah.
Right? So the concealment of his birth was part of the reason that the government at the time had intensified its efforts to try and get to the Mahdi before he escapes their claws.
Right.
And we have plenty of evidence to show that they were getting increasingly worried that the 12th Imam was about to come. They knew Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam, he's the 11th Imam, so surely the 12th one, based on all of those prophetic ahadith about the 12 Imams, the 12th one is about to come. So you can imagine, or maybe just try and imagine the amount of pressure, surveillance, and sheer terror that the family of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari had to face at that time. So trying to conceal it was part of the plan to protect the Imam, number one. Number two, when the birth of the Imam is concealed, but then he's shown afterwards to 50 people of the top caliber scholars. Shouldn't that be enough? Then you say that some people followed Ja'far. Sure, some people did follow Ja'far because they were either ignorant or arrogant. But does that mean that it didn't happen? Absolutely not. Just like the atheism example that I provided.
Right.
And so later on, you might find this interesting actually, that Ja'far, despite claiming to be the Imam and despite receiving scathing critiques from Imam al-Mahdi himself later on, who wrote letters addressed to the Shia, warning them about Ja'far in trying to sort of create some balance and make the people more aware. Despite that, he had a lot of children, a lot of offspring, his children, his grandchildren. So he created a bit of a tribe for himself. And yet in the time of Sheikh al-Mufid, someone asks the Sheikh about Ja'far and whether he was a person worthy of praise or us cursing him. Was he good? Was he bad? Was this like all a show? And so Sheikh al-Mufid responds by saying, look, let's not talk too much about this because even his descendants are now 12 Shia. So it didn't catch on. It didn't catch on. He tried, again, without trying to evaluate Ja'far's personality, but it didn't catch on. And now we see it. Now, the 12 Shia community worldwide is comprised of hundreds of millions of people, and they all believe in 12 Imams until some clown comes out of somewhere, God knows where, I don't want to mention names, and he says that this is all a fabrication, or the guy you mentioned in London, this is all a fabrication, it's a concoction, the 4 emissaries made it up and things like that. I was
going to say, Said, on that point on the Sufara, because you could argue that they are 4 fallible scholars, righteous scholars, but 4 scholars at the time of the Ghaibat al-Sughra, which we are resting all of our laurels on. Our whole tashayyu', everything we believe in, you could point back to being on the back of the tawqi'at between the Sufara and the Imam alayhi salam. And for example, we've seen in the tawqi'at themselves, Imam al-Mahdi will curse Ash-Shalmaghani, for example, or will curse different scholars, and we've seen that the scholarly world itself is not free or safe from criticism, if that, at most, maybe even curse from the Imam himself. So can we not argue that, or could the alternative, the deviants, the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt and their followers, could they not argue that your whole belief system rests on the back of 4 guys and them not colluding with each other to come up with this, concocted idea of an infallible mystical figure who's nowhere to be seen? Could we not say that from a different perspective?
First of all, our religion is not centered around the 4 emissaries of Imam al-Zaman. Far from it. Our religion is based and grounded on the Quran and the Hadith, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, and the Hadith corpus attributed to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam through a very, very solid chain, including the what's called al-Usul al-Arba'mi'ah. And so to suggest or to think that it was the 4 Sufara or emissaries of Imam al-Zaman that basically gave us most of our articles of belief, that is just not factual. It's just not true.
Yeah.
what the four emissaries did, I think, was more of an administrative role. They guided the community through a very rough patch, a very difficult time of facing a whole new reality where they don't have access to their imam.
Right.
And so they were indispensable in the sense that at least there was some indirect means of communication with the imam through them, number one. Number two, they helped through those communiques with the imam to try and quell some of the sources of discord and fitna. You mentioned Ash-Shalmaghani and others. And so where individuals try to take advantage of this vacuum that's created by our inability to access the imam directly, they helped communicate messages from the imam to try and sort of subdue the impact of those fitna. And number three, they helped manage the affairs of the community. They helped provide guidance to try and help them sort of reach safe shores and become acclimated to this new reality.
Right.
Where in the absence of the imam, what do we do? Do we panic? Do we just run amok and not know what to do? Or do we try and stick to the basics and hold on to our foundations and do this for the long run because we're waiting for the imam to return? So number one, that's just not true, that the four emissaries are conduit to our faith and our beliefs. And number two, you need to remember that even our belief in Imam al-Mahdi himself is not based on the teachings of the four emissaries.
Yeah.
As I said, there were eyewitnesses, number one. Number two, we have a hadith, and I wanted to mention this earlier when you made that point about the hadith of the Prophet about the 12 Imams. One book that I highly recommend the dear viewers watch, to read rather, is a book by Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Safi Gulpaygani, the late Sheikh Safi Gulpaygani rahmatullah ta'ala alayh, who was one of the most preeminent students of Sayyid al-Burujardi and later became a marja and died only a few years ago. He has a book which has a whole backstory that I won't get into, but the book is called Muntakhab al-Athar fi Ahwal al-Imam al-Thani Ashar, and the English version I think comes in 3 volumes, and it's called Selected Narrations About the 12th Imam.
Okay.
When you read that book, you'll realize just how ignorant we are. We think that Rasulullah said, Al-a'immatu min ba'di ithna ashar kulluhum min Quraysh. What we don't know is that Rasulullah has dozens upon dozens of ahadith in which not only did he stress the fact that there's going to be 12 imams after him, but he named them.
Yeah.
Okay.
He mentions them by name, and he says that this is the first imam, then his son, then his son, then his son, all the way to Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, which means that Imam al-Mahdi is the son of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari, which debunks the idea that the imam wasn't born and will be born at some future date.
Can I interrupt with your permission?
Sure.
But if I'm not mistaken, that hadith, we've referenced the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, the guys with the beanies in the previous episode, and they had a response to us, but I don't want to spend a segment on them, but just a question off the back of something they portray or they put forward. They use that hadith. I'm not sure because I haven't seen the origin.
By the way, it's not that hadith.
Oh, is it? They use a hadith where they mention the 12 and then say that there's
So they use
Mahdi
a hadith mentioned by Sheikh At-Tusi in his Ghaiba, in which, so again, the Prophet named the Imams one by one in so many ahadith, on so many different occasions. One of them is the hadith that Sheikh At-Tusi mentions.
Right, the Mahdiin one.
So very quickly, what it says is, and I recently wrote a whole article about this.
Yes.
On these false Mahdis or YouTube Mahdis, I call them, or something like that.
Where can our listeners read the article?
Substack.
It's on Substack. So Sayyid Mahdi Modarresi.substack.com or something.
Okay.
So the hadith is like this. Rasulullah, on his deathbed, says, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, that you will be the Imam after me. Then upon your death, pass the mantle to your son, Imam al-Hasan. Upon his death, he should pass it to his brother Imam al-Hussein, who upon his death should pass it to his son, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, and then it goes all the way down to Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. So far, so good. Then he says, Rasulullah says that upon his death, he shall pass the mantle to his son. And he mentions him by his actual name. Then he says, upon his death, he should pass it on to the next Mahdi. So the imamate will end with the Mahdi. After that, there'll be a new phase of Mahdiyin. These are guided people. Now, he gives it to his son, who then gives it to his son, and so on and so forth. So a few problems don't just pop up, but they explode in our face. Number one, where is Imam al-Mahdi? If some clown somewhere comes out and says that I'm the second Mahdi or the third Mahdi or the
reincarnation
27th, whatever, like, where is your grandfather? Right? The Imam al-Mahdi has to have died
for his
for the next person to then become the Mahdi. Where is he? He went into occultation. He never came back, right? Do you not believe he will come back? I mean, this goes against literally everything we believe in. That the Imam went into occultation at the age of 5, never to be seen again, except in 2025 or something. Some dude who's got an American mother and an Egyptian father, doesn't speak a word of Arabic, has to speak off a teleprompter, suddenly comes out and says, I am the Qa'im, I am the Mahdi, and based on this hadith. How does this hadith prove anything?
Well, that hadith mentions names, so it will say Ahmed, then there's the first, and Abdullah
and then
the
Abdullah.
second, and so on and so forth. So he'll use, obviously this is...
So number one, where is the 12th Imam?
Right.
Number two, Ahmed, who's, Ahmed
al-Hasan.
The only good, there's a lot of good Ahmed I know, and you're one of them. But like, who's this Ahmed al-Hasan guy? Like, honestly, he's a terrorist. He was a guy who decided to wage war against the Iraqi state on the day of Ashura, no less, right? He chooses to announce his uprising there, killing hundreds of people in the process. And then they brought some of his followers on national television in Iraq. And they said, who's this guy? What does he do? And they started telling stories which are just outrageous. And you don't even need to go to those people, because you might say it's confession under duress. If you listen to his actual voice recordings, because surely the Mahdi was going to use WhatsApp to send voice messages. You listen to his voice recordings. The guy misreads the Quran, right? Let alone everything else. He's some illiterate. Nobody knows him. His own tribe disowned him. They said this guy, is a fraud. He claims to be a Sayyid. None of us is a Sayyid. And he says that Imam al-Mahdi is my grandfather, which again confuses everything once again, because who's your father? Plus, this is your father. And he's saying, this is my son. So, the whole thing is such a satirical, not just illogical, but just it's downright satirical. And so the last point I want to mention about this topic is, this guy says, I'm the second Mahdi. Why you? He says, because my name's Abdullah. Are you kidding me? Are you like the only Abdullah in the world? He's like, no. But I'm the Abdullah who's claimed to be the Mahdi. I'm the first person to claim to be the Mahdi. Well, newsflash, you're not the only fraudster named Abdullah. There's been many, many people before you. And in fact, there's an entire book by one of the scholars and university researchers in Iran who wrote about all these false Mahdis. And look it up. You're certainly not the first or the last person to make this claim.
Okay, let's move on. Said, I think there's a couple more things we want to get through.
There is. But I just want to ask like a random question just on this subject of having the piece of light. Would you ever be up to meet him and debate him live?
So there's two ways to look at this. On the one hand, I would love to meet any imposter who has the audacity to come out and not only try to shred the entirety of the religion of Islam, but make the claim that he's the Mahdi, just to essentially see what I can do to him, right? Because it's not going to be hard, right? A few verses, maybe asking him a couple of questions here and there, and he'll be exposed for the fraudster that he is. On the other hand, you really don't want to give him more credit than it's due, and I really think that he's a fringe element. He's not taken seriously. I mean, I'll give him the fact that he's social media savvy, and he's got some funding, God knows from where, which is invested heavily in social media. Sadly enough, if you write the name of the Imam on YouTube, most of the videos that show up are his.
Really?
Oh,
and
no.
so surely he's done some...
That's the fault of us as a community.
That's definitely a problem. And I would encourage, people who are into SEO optimization and, things like that to try and look into this, because this guy is, I'm sure he's paying big bucks for this kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I did issue a challenge to him in an article that I wrote about him. And I said, look, you say that you're the Mahdi. Number one, how's it going with cleansing the world of oppression and filling it with justice and whatnot? I mean, haven't you been watching the news lately? So the guy is a fraud. It's absurd and kind of a waste of breath to even talk about him. And secondly, I issued a challenge. I said, if you can deposit 6 Bitcoins into my digital wallet, I would look at that favorably. And, I even offered to give him my digital wallet details, although he doesn't need it because, I mean, he has knowledge of the unseen. So surely he can manage that. But he hasn't gotten back to me. I told him, make it rain, but nothing's happened yet. There's 0 money in my digital wallet.
I like that. Okay, Sayyid Mahdi, we're going to move on with your permission. Now, on a similar note to talking about Imam al-Mahdi, there are those who have the strong belief that the school of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam has been misrepresented through deviation in the scholarly circle, through the Hawza specifically, and that those, the scholarly institution, the Hawza institution, has become deviated, has been compromised by Sunni infiltration, and maybe certain sciences within the Hawza's ilm al-rajal, ilm al-usul, all of the different sciences that are taught have been messed up, really. And that all of the aforementioned deviations or issues that we've mentioned, such people would also agree that these are deviations. But then say that the 12 usuli, imami infrastructure of education in itself is flawed, that the leaders and the maraja who run these institutions themselves are corrupt, that there are misrepresentations or misguidances within the school of the Ahlul Bayt, or the followers, for example, Shahada Thalith being not in the adhan for some, but not in the salah for most. Or, for example, that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt have a higher level of maqam than the majority of the mainstream accept. But different things like this. I'm sure you would understand far more than I would about the intricacies of these details. But how do you feel about this as someone who's, of course, not just a graduate of the Hawza, but someone who's very much within the Hawzawi circles? How does that make you feel? And how do those within the Hawza circles feel about these things?
First off, I think that it's easy to create misconceptions that are based on really what could only be described as conspiracy theories. For people to say that the entire religious establishment is corrupt and that the sciences and disciplines taught in the Islamic seminaries have been corrupted, that very much sounds like a conspiracy theory to me. I don't know about you, but like the whole thing is corrupt, the system's crashing, everything's crumbling down, we can't rely on anything anymore. It's like those tinfoil hat wearing people who are always on about how the government is like infiltrating every aspect of our lives. That's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it sounds like. I would say that a more balanced approach would be to say that just like any other institution, it's prone to making mistakes. It's got room for improvement. It has issues which could certainly use some, genuine desire to scrutinize in order to improve and fix whatever flaws that it has. So that's as far as the institution overall is concerned. As far as the disciplines taught in the Hawza, you mentioned al-Rijal, for example. Right. Al-Rijal is something that's been part and parcel of our scholarly endeavor since the time of the Imams themselves. People would go to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and say, if I hear something that's attributed to you, quoted by someone that I don't fully trust, can I then take it from them or not? So this was a concern that people had since the time of the Imams. And so to dismiss ilm al-rijal and say this is something we need to throw away is a mistake, because you need a degree of certainty that when you're quoted a hadith, that it's coming from the right sources, that it's not some made up thing. For example, I was looking at this today. There is a hadith that's often quoted by Sufis.
Right.
And so, interestingly, a lot of these ahadith, which are used by Sufi-leaning scholars and speakers today, they all come from one or two sources. And so these sources have been dismissed by our ulama as being not authentic. So we can't dismiss ilm al-rijal because it's crucial to a degree. And we cannot take ilm al-rijal as the only metric with which we verify a hadith either. Right. So there is ifrat and there is tafriq. There is excessive reliance on something and there is not enough reliance on the discipline of ilm al-rijal. And so there has to be balance between these two, and that's what our scholars do. Right.
So can I just add a further question just on this matter, is that I think like this noise when it comes to this thought process is that it's mainly by youth. And I don't hear it from our elders. I don't see it from our scholars or speakers that I know. It's mainly like youth that disappear here and there and then come back and share the news to the world that, this is what's happening in the Hawza circles, this is what's happening by the scholars, this is how corrupt the whole Shi'i system is in Najaf and in Qom and everything. And they use like a hadith, like they're like experts when it comes to the world of hadith. And to us, it's like, okay, it sounds like what they're saying is, gospel.
It's convincing.
Like, no, of course. We can find the references to what they're quoting when it comes to the narrations and the reports, but how should we approach it? Like,
can I add to that as well, Sayyidina, with permission? But for example, when we say Imam al-Mahdi will bring a new religion and he will go to town on the scholars and all of these things, I mean, from a logical point of view, that has to mean that the system of scholarship, the position of scholars before the arrival of the awaited Imam will be in a mess. Yeah, or will need complete, turning upside down and reshaping altogether the system of education, the system of scholarship, and the Imam will absolutely go berserk on the scholars. So I think
But is that true though? Let me just challenge you on that. Where did that notion come from? That the Imam will come and he will dismantle the entire system and go ballistic on all of the scholars.
I think it's inferences from some of the classical books, Ghaibat al-Tusi, Ghaibat al-Nu'mani.
No. Even in those references, the hadiths that we have speak either about fuqaha in generic terms, which could in fact be a reference to non-Shia fuqaha, or it actually specifies which group of fuqaha. For example, one famous hadith that's often quoted in this regard is one in which the Imam says, or he's asked about the Batriya.
Yes.
Right? So the Imam says that when he reappears, he's going to combat the Batriya fuqaha.
16,000.
Right? Yeah. So it's got nothing to do with mainstream fuqaha. In fact, if anything, the fact that Imam al-Zaman says, وَأَمَّا الْحَوَادِثُ الْوَاقِعَةُ فَارْجِعُوا فِيهَا إِلَى رُوَاةِ أَحَادِيثِنَا, you should refer, when it comes to new events, you should refer to those who narrate our traditions, right? Those who narrate our traditions, meaning what? Meaning the fuqaha.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows anything about the fuqaha, when you attend their classes, when you attend their dars al-kharij, for example, you'll see them quoting the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt in addition to the Quran. And so the Imam simultaneously tells us that if you go through any affliction that you don't know how to deal with, refer back to the fuqaha, but then when he comes, he's going to go to town with the fuqaha and slaughter everyone. It just doesn't add up. It makes absolutely no sense. So either those ahadith have to be taken in their right context, or we have to assume that they're speaking not about Shia fuqaha, at least not mainstream Shia fuqaha.
Right. But could you not argue that the fuqaha, which the Imam infers, are the fuqaha who he calls as the one who disseminate our hadith, what he considers to be fuqaha, not what we consider to be fuqaha? Because when you say that, the fuqaha today are the ones who narrate hadith, that's us saying it in 2025. But when the Imam in his tawqit mentions the one who narrates his hadith, that's his standard of faqih, which he's relating to, and he's
No, but
referring
this is simple observation.
Yeah.
As I said, if you attend the classes of these fuqaha, what do they discuss? What do they talk about? When they give speeches, for instance, when they write books,
Yeah.
do they quote the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, or do they quote the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt?
Of course, yeah.
And so do they not fit the description of being the narrators of the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt? Absolutely they do.
Sure.
Who else narrates the hadith of the Ahlul
very
Bayt
true.
other than the fuqaha? And so it would be, I think, disingenuous to say that these fuqaha don't fit the description, and that somehow the Imam, is he trying to confuse us by saying فَارْجِعُوا فِيهَا إِلَى رُوَاةِ أَحَادِيثِنَا? Don't you think the Imam, if he was looking for something a lot more specific, that he should have actually elaborated on this?
Right.
He's simply saying, refer to those who narrate the traditions of us, the Ahlul Bayt. In other ahadith, the Imam provides examples of their morals, examples of their God consciousness. مَنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْفُقَهَاء صَائِنًا لِنَفْسِهِ مطيعا لأمر مولاه مخالفا على هواه فللعوام أن يقلدوه. One whose character is one that's been molded in a way that produces piety and taqwa and so on, in addition to the fact that they base their faith and their teachings and their jurisprudence on the words of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And that's, as I said, it's very clear. But if someone wants to twist that and say, oh, the hadith says يَأْتِ بِدِينٍ جَدِيدٍ. First of all,
What
is that one hadith, is it even authentic? Is it reliable? Is it something, and even if it is, does it make any sense that Imam al-Zaman will bring a whole new religion?
It's metaphorical.
We believe, every single Shia believes, that the 12th Imam is a successor of the Prophet, not a new prophet. And so if he's not a new prophet, how could he bring a whole new religion? That's why scholars have interpreted this. If it was verified, if it was authentic, they say that he will present God's religion to the masses, such that because people have become so distant from the religion of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they will see it as a whole new religion. Right now, I'll just add one more point. Right now, is everybody, the large, let's say, bulk of the Shia world or the Muslim community worldwide, do they follow the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that we find in our books right now? Is our lives, are they congruent? Are they compatible with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? For the most part, no. Right? We do whatever we want to do, and then hope someone comes along and says, oh, it's okay, it's halal. Give it a rubber stamp. And that's why most people gravitate towards false imposters, because their job is to make everything halal for everyone. It's to appease and to please. My point is, right now, a lot of the ulama, if they came out and they spoke publicly and in like a brazen manner and said, this is religion, this is A, B, C, and D, and so on, most people would see that to be kind of foreign, because they're just used to their lifestyles, they want to do their own thing. My point is, Imam al-Zaman will come, and again, if we accept that hadith to be authentic, he will restore the religion and bring it back to its pristine origin in a way that the majority of people who are ignorant about the faith will say, oh, what is that? Like, this is so alien, it's so foreign to us.
Because one of the things, Said, which I think people have a gripe with in that camp is the corruption which they have witnessed, for example, with khums money. Taqleed in general, having issues with the origins of taqleed and khums, of course, which falls under the taqleed angle. As I mentioned, Shahada Thalitha, Islamic dates within the Islamic calendar, birthdays, anniversaries of death, so on and so forth. Other things, for example, even when it comes to moon sighting, as an example, I know it all roots back to the verification, the way you understand the muhkam and the mutashabih and the hadith and what's interpreted from them, which books, Tafsir Imam al-Askari, for example, and different works and books, some are accepted and some are rejected. But what I think Sayyid Ali inferred, and which I actually agree with, is that the conspiracies become appealing to the general public because those who have knowledge of hadith, unlike the majority, I'd say, of our youth, portray things and obviously put it forward with their arguments using the Quran and the hadith. So then it becomes, the lines are very blurred, you know, and a lot of it is mainstream. We're talking about people, for example, who are Shia. So, for example, they'll praise the ziyarat, the ad'iyah, whatnot, the lives of the Imam. They won't, for example, devalue them. But of course, others would say they may be amongst the ghulat. So I just think it's very interesting to understand if there is any airtime given by the ulama, the grand maraja, and so on, to those who are quite literally, you know, calling them out, and also maybe presenting what they would call a new religion. Because, you know, that would be something which I'd assume they would, you know, call it, right? What do you think?
Can I just mention, I mean, again, a lot of different points that you raised, which are all interesting.
I have this problem.
No, they're really good points. It's just that
for 3 years,
it's just that Sayyid Ali looks like he's ready to go munch right now, and we're going on and on about this.
Sayyid, don't ask me another question.
But let me try and address as many as I can. So, you mentioned, first of all, that a lot of people have witnessed corruption within the khums system. What corruption have people witnessed when it comes to the dispensation of khums? The operative word being witness. Is there some money that gets squandered here and there? Maybe. But to say that the entire system is corrupt is a big stretch.
There's no evidence.
And I'll tell you why.
That it shouldn't exist now anyway, it's reserved for the time of the Imam based on the Tawqi'at. Do they not say that khums in itself shouldn't exist?
Okay, so first of all, you're referring to the statement found in the letter of Imam al-Mahdi to his fourth emissary, if I'm not mistaken, in which the Imam says that I've made khums halal for you.
Yes.
And so some people have used this to attack the entire religious establishment, all the ulama. I mean, imagine if this was true, that the Imam has explicitly said you don't need to pay khums, and yet the ulama continue to insist that khums is wajib. What does that make the ulama? But that is a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Why? Because 14 centuries of scholarship, the most pious, most learned ulama, one after the other, they all insist that khums is wajib. Suddenly some random guy in London discovers that it's not, which makes all of these ulama corrupt. What are the chances that it's this guy who's corrupt and not all of those ulama? I'd say pretty high chance. That's number one. Number two, and the example I want to give about this point before I move on, is I once said to someone, again, some imposter wrote a whole treatise, an article, saying that hijab is not wajib. And as ridiculous and as laughable as this argument is, because hijab is considered darura and part of the belief of every Muslim who's ever lived, right? Everyone knows hijab is wajib. So then some guy comes out and having studied, I think, for about 3 years, learning Arabic grammar and maybe some basic logic and whatnot, comes out and says, no, hijab is not wajib. So I said to this person, I said, look, one of the people who was influenced by him, I said, imagine you suffer from let's say, health condition, health complication, and you consult 1,000 doctors, and each and every single one of them says that you need an operation as soon as possible. Then you come across a guy who spent a 4-year stint in medical school, didn't really complete anything, dropped out, and he comes to you and says, no, you're perfectly fine. You don't need to do an operation. What's the reasonable thing to do here? To follow the 1,000 qualified doctors, even if you don't like them, even if you've got some, personal issues or whatnot, or follow this random dude? So he picked up on the point I was trying to make really quickly, and he said, Sayyid, I'm with you. I know this is ridiculous, but my wife, she's all over the place. And so that was that. So that's point number one. Point number two, with all of the ahadith that we have, and the verse in the Quran, which speaks about the obligation of khums, Imam al-Mahdi sends a letter, the final letter he writes to one of his emissaries, and in it, he abrogates all of this. Does that make any sense? Isn't that like super confusing? It's like, imagine if Imam al-Mahdi came and, or rather wrote a letter to one of the emissaries and said, Salat is not wajib. Would you take that literally? Would you dismiss all of the verses, all of the ahadith, all of the seerah of the imams and say, based on this one line, salat is no longer wajib, it's mubah? You wouldn't accept it now, would you? Khums is the same. Even these people acknowledge that khums was wajib, but then by virtue of this one line, it's no longer wajib. It makes no sense. And so, scholars, you think they haven't discussed this? You think they haven't come across this? And what they say makes absolute sense. They say that when the Imam says that we have made khums mubah, meaning halal, meaning you don't have to worry about it, what the Imam is saying is that you don't need to worry about khums when it comes to taking things from other people.
Right.
Meaning that you have to pay your khums. But if you get invited by your friend to go and have dinner in his house, do you need to investigate whether there was money paid on this, the khums paid on this money that was used to purchase the food or not? No. Okay. In other words, you give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and you don't worry about it because you've paid your own khums, and we have made it mubah. In fact, the same statement makes sense when you read it in context. The Imam says so that your children's birth becomes legitimate. Allah. In other words, so that this money that's been consumed by you doesn't affect your children. Otherwise, paying khums on your own, how is that related to your children and so on? My point is, you have to, and that's one of the problems we have with, you mentioned the youth, may Allah bless them. I, for one, think that it's great that we have a lot of youth that are showing more
I feel they're
interest.
genuinely passionate in this.
A lot of them are really genuinely passionate, but they're misguided.
Right.
And the reason they become misguided is very simple. Because they go about this process without proper supervision, without guidance from actual scholars. It's like a youth trying to become a brain surgeon on his own. Right? Will that work? They could have the best of intentions, but they will be misguided at some point. There's almost no way they'll become actual, physicians who can perform brain surgery on their own. They need that supervision and instruction. So I salute the youth who are trying to learn more about their faith, but they need to understand that the way you go about this, there's a process. And the process is very simple. You learn the basics, you learn Arabic. Somebody actually once said to me, oh, do I have to go and learn Arabic now? I said, yeah.
Of course.
That's how it works. You want to become well versed in Catholic theology, you have to learn Latin. That's how it works. You want to learn about Jewish jurisprudence, you got to learn Hebrew. Suddenly Arabic is too hard, and so I could just
Everything
wing
else,
it. I could just go and learn, all the complicated disciplines by skipping some of these initial stages. Absolutely not. You need to show commitment. You need to work hard. And that means going to the Hawza and learning from scholars.
Right. I see.
Ahsantum. I don't know if you have time.
Sure.
For one final question
Go
from
for
me
it.
on my end on this whole debunking and misconceptions and things is that when it comes to the Shahada Thalitha, Ashhadu anna Aliyan Waliullah, why is there like a debate whether it should be part of Adhan, it shouldn't be included in the Adhan, it's mustahab in the Adhan, some say it's wajib for the Adhan to be complete. People go as far as to say, no, Aslan, it should be in your tashahhud and salah. Like I've heard of all of these.
And yes, sorry. And is it not the rules not differ? So, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, Sayyidina, but it's for example the ruling, for example, for Sayyid Sadiq al-Shirazi, that it's mustahab. But for example, to do it for if you're a muqallid of Sayyid al-Sistani, it's haram. Like, and why is there such a massive differentiation when for some of these scholars, these alternative scholars, will say that no, dhikrun aliyan ibadah, like you have to. And from a logical point of view, it kind of makes sense. What do you do? How do you navigate these things? These are things which we hear about, right?
And we're passionate about as well. Imam Ali means the world to us.
Look, passion is obviously something that we have to have. In fact, the Quran literally says, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةِ. Mawadda is love with a passion. Mawadda is love that's translated into action. Mawadda is the next, it's like a step up over love. So passion's great. And I think people having passion, I can see you've got a replica of Dhul Fiqar down there, and that's wonderful. But we need to keep in mind that whether it's Dhul Fiqar or Shahada Thalitha, these are symbols that we adhere to and that we are supposed to testify to deep down in our hearts before they turn into symbols.
Right.
Okay.
And the symbols can appear, but there are times when you can't incorporate these into, let's say, the talbiyah. Like, can you say labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika lak labbaik when you're wrapping the shroud, the ihram, and include ashhadu anna aliya waliyullah in it? No. These are statements that are tawqifiyah, meaning that they are specific quotes that you must recite for the purpose of that act of worship.
Right. And
so adding things to it or removing things from it, bear with me before anybody says, muqassir this, that, and the other. I'll get to the actual point.
Make an episode on you.
We need to know that these statements, including the adhan and iqama and whatnot, they are transmitted to us by the Holy Prophet, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and that we must take them the way they are and not tamper with them. However, at the same time, we have ahadith, general ahadith, that say whenever you testify to the prophethood of the messenger, add your testimony to the imamah of Ali ibn Abi Talib afterwards, right? It's not in the context of adhan, it's just a general thing. Now, this could be that whenever you say this, make this proclamation, also add Ali ibn Abi Talib and his imamah, salamullahi alayh, in this proclamation. Maybe this excludes the adhan. And this is the view of some of the maraja, including Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani, for example. Yes. He's pretty adamant that this should not be included in the adhan, but especially the iqamah. Others have said, no, this is a general statement, which means it applies across the board. So it's a difference of opinion between the scholars. And differences of opinion are natural, they're healthy, they're okay.
Of course.
And it's not something that we should dismiss, because without differing opinions...
It's not a haram, halal thing. It's like...
So sometimes it can be. So some ulama have said that if you say the third testimony in the iqamah, there are scholars who say that the iqamah is part of the salah, right? and that it's wajib. Now, most of the maraja' today don't say that it's wajib, but there were scholars, especially previously, used to believe that it's wajib and part of the salah, or at least ihtiyat wujubi. So if this is part of the salah, and you include something in it that was not originally part of it, then it could become problematic. So, as I said, nowadays, I don't believe any of the maraja' say that, maybe Sayyid Shubayri. But I would defer the listeners, the audience, to their own marja', see what he has to say, and do it. Because ultimately, if the maraja' don't believe the adhan and iqamah, adhan certainly isn't part of the salah. Iqamah, for the most part, is not considered as part of the act of prayer itself. If that is the case, then adding the testimony to the Imam of Amir al-Mu'mineen is not problematic, because it's neither haram nor wajib.
Wouldn't invalidate
it wouldn't invalidate anything, right? And that's why most maraja' say that the best thing to do is to say it. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim has a statement about this, where he says that now that it's become a staple of tashayyu', a sign of tashayyu', it shouldn't be removed. Leave it in there, it's fine, because we're dealing with...
That's for adhan and iqamah.
Yeah, of course. We're speaking about adhan and iqamah. So he said you should leave it. Well, the one in tashahhud is definitely not a staple of tashayyu', right? But the one in adhan and iqamah, he says that now that it's a staple of tashayyu', it's a sign of being a Shia, it's fine, leave it in there, but don't say it with the intention of this being part of the original adhan and iqamah. In other words, when you do say it, say it as a mustahab, as something that you included because of those other ahadith that said whenever you proclaim the prophethood of the messenger, you should also proclaim the imam.
Like reciting the salawat when you mention Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu
for example, sallallahu alayhi wa.
Okay.
Yeah, so based on that, I don't see this to be such a big deal, honestly. Some people try to make a big deal out of it because they're trying to, again, portray this image of a fractured community, too many contradictions, too many disagreements. But you could say the same thing about the medical doctors community. There are lots of disagreements, but does that mean that the system is undermined? That it's corrupted to the core, that it needs to be dismantled? Absolutely not. They see it as a healthy phenomenon, as a sign of the fact that this community is vibrant and alive and engaging in all of these different conversations, and each one has the freedom to adopt their own view, and you can emulate them, and inshallah Allah will accept it from you, because these people are qualified to be a source of emulation, right? So just defer to your marja' and you're good to go.
I like that.
As for the other point, I think you mentioned something about the different dates ascribed to the
small discrepancies.
Events. I mean, look, when it comes to historical, let's say, events, there's no 100% foolproof, definitive way of saying whether this event occurred on this date or not. Ultimately, this is subject to historical scrutiny. And you have to go with whatever evidence you have and what you perceive to be strong evidence or weak evidence. There are different opinions about it throughout history. And so, for example, the birth of Amir al-Mu'mineen, when did that happen?
It's disputed, right?
So
the
13th of Rajab, right?
We say 13th, but
we have a very strong hadith that says it happened in the Hijjah. And so scholars have looked at this and they're like, okay, first of all, don't panic. Don't lose your control. No big deal, right? We could celebrate the birth of Amir al-Mu'mineen on 2 occasions or just on one of those occasions. It's fine, right? This is not the end of the world. So that I think is an important point to make, especially to some communities that take this so seriously, that if God forbid someone came out and said Dhul Hijjah, right? Swords will be swinging. And I don't think we should look at it that way. Did you know? My uncle, His Eminence, Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Modarresi, once said something which was really moving. He said, did you know that when it comes to the Shahada of Fatima al-Zahra, alayha salatu wassalam, we have something like 22 different narrations, different dates. 22, if I'm not mistaken. It was a very, very big number. And then he made a really interesting point. He said, maybe that's because of two things. Number one, because just as Fatima Zahra's grave was hidden, just as she was buried at night, so that people wouldn't participate in her funeral and wouldn't recognize her burial place, similarly, the date of her passing was also obscured, leaving her martyrdom in this space, which is kind of, it's mysterious. It's being guarded. This secret is guarded until the 12th Imam comes. Number one. Number two, he said maybe the other reason is so that her martyrdom is commemorated multiple times a year, so that people don't forget this travesty of justice, this grave act of oppression against the daughter of Rasulullah, and therefore God himself. And that's why you have multiple traditions.
You think of it like that.
Yeah.
I honestly, when it comes to the births of the Imams, the Shahadat of the Imams, I think it's good that we have multiple references about those, so that we remember the Imams more often.
More occasions.
Because we don't remember them often enough, do we? Some of the Imams, alayhim salatu wassalam, honestly, you feel like they're oppressed.
Neglected,
Honestly neglected, because throughout the year, we're too busy talking about whether khums money is being squandered or not, whether the ulama are corrupt or not, whether Rasulullah missed a prayer or made a mistake in one of the salawat or not. All these peripheral, negligible, useless things, without going to the source of the knowledge, without referring to the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam, and learning from them and being guided by them and their teachings. Which actually reminds me, I mean, you mentioned the Prophet and Sahwun Nabi, and how some people make a big deal out of that. And my point to them is, okay, fine. Maybe you were able to somehow prove using your version of al-Rijal that the Prophet might have made a mistake in one of his prayers. What have you actually achieved? What do you think you've done? You think you deserve a medal now? That you proved Rasulullah made some minor mistake? That's if we're going to give them this point about, maybe it's true, right? But what have you actually done? Have you brought anyone closer to Rasulullah and therefore to Allah? Or have you just confused people? And that reminds me of a hadith. When the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam says, don't listen, and it kind of just connects back to your first question. Don't listen to a scholar. So it begins with negation. It doesn't say listen to scholars who do this. It says, no, exclude everyone. Don't listen to anyone unless they fit this description. And the Imam provides 3 metrics. One of them is this. He says, the one who can take you out of doubt and into certainty. All these discussions made by these fringe, freakish elements do the opposite.
Take you to doubt.
They make people doubtful. That's what they're trying to do. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, there is doubt in their hearts, Allah will only increase that doubt, which is what the Quran refers to as disease. What have you achieved? Just think about it. Instead of actually sitting down and speaking about the greatness of Rasulullah, about the fact that Rasulullah was the greatest exemplar of divine morality, about Rasulullah being better than all of the previous prophets, and being handed to us, for lack of a better term, on a silver platter. This is your prophet, the best of messengers. And this is how we deal with him? Some people accuse him of being delirious on his deathbed, and some clown comes along today and says he missed a rak'ah in salah. So what? Congratulations. Do you want us all to cheer for you now? Because you've discovered some trailblazing thing that no one's ever seen before, supposedly? It's absolute rubbish. It distracts us from really engaging with our faith, from getting to know God's vicegerents. And if I may, I don't know if you have any more questions or more time, I just want to address one more point, which is, we talked about how taqsir and ghulu being 2 sides of the same coin. the middle path is to accept that the Holy Prophet and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt were number one, the best of the best. I don't think anyone can deny this. If you can deny it, if you try to deny it, then again, you can call yourself whatever you want. You're not a Shia. They were the best of the best. They were the greatest sources of emulation and role models. They also had divine knowledge. They were appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their obedience is wajib. You can say anything else that you like that doesn't tarnish or in any way undermine these points, right? And so be it. I don't care. Follow them, obey them, listen to them, connect with them. Inshallah, you'll find your path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But don't remove their ranks from them. Right. One of the things we say in Ziyarat Abil Fadl al-Abbas, which I find mesmerizing, it's not the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, who was an infallible, divinely appointed Imam. Abil Fadl al-Abbas. It says, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ مَنْ قَتَلَكَ. May Allah curse the one who killed you. May Allah curse the one who prevented you from reaching the Euphrates. And may Allah curse the one who denied your virtues. Why deny their virtues? Is it jealousy? Is it envy? Honest to God, I think with some of these imposters, it's envy. It's like, why should it be them when it can be me? And so, what's the point? Just, if you accept them as being divinely appointed, if you accept them as being the best of the best, if you accept them as being God's representatives and the ones who carry that message to us, fine. Go and try and, fulfill these beliefs that you have. Inshallah, you'll get there.
Yeah.
But if you try to play games here and there just to distract, just to confuse, just to push the community away from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, not less by praising their enemies, right? If you start doing stuff like that, then you should know we're going to counter all of that. We're going to respond to you. We're going to disgrace you. We're going to humiliate you. Inshallah.
I think that's the overarching point. I think there's a lot more I want to ask, but maybe in a part two, inshallah, Sayyid.
Inshallah.
But the overarching point, which I think, hopefully, inshallah, we've addressed today and we've been able to recognize is there's a lot of noise and distraction around us, online, in person, in books, wherever you turn. But ultimately, the search for truth is so important, and you'll always be guided towards the truth. And that hadith, you said it was Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about don't listen to Imam Rida alayhi salam, who puts shak in your heart. And I think that's a very important standard for us to follow in a world which is so conflated and the moral compass is so conflated. Understand what the truth is, and then inshallah we will see who, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, hadith Amir al-Mu'mineen, we follow those who follow the truth.
يعرف الحق تعرف أهله. Which actually, if I may just add one more quick point on that, which is that if you're ever confused, there are a couple of things you can do. One is to appeal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to genuinely pray to God and ask Him without any presuppositions, without any prejudices, any biases, anything of that nature. Just turn to Him in Salatul Layl, in, the Watayra, in, at Fajr time, and just surrender yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ilahi, I don't know, I'm confused, guide me, teach me. This goes a long way. And the second thing is, go with the mainstream. Right? We have a hadith where the Imams alayhimus salam say that if you're going to take knowledge from someone, make sure you take it ممن هو من شيعتنا. Take it from our followers. Don't go left, right, and center. Don't go after people who are, fringe and kind of on the sidelines. Go to the mainstream ulama, the mainstream fuqaha of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. They are a lot less likely, let's put it that way, to make a mistake, right? But when you follow someone who's a fringe element, the chances of him getting it wrong are very, very high. And just always remind yourself that it's the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. The Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, right? The Quran and The Ahlul Bayt.
Thaqalain.
The one who comes and tells you Thaqalain, the one who tells you our hadith corpus has been completely compromised. These same people will refer to some ahadith to further their agenda. Excuse me. When they tell you that the hadith corpus has been compromised. And when they say the hadith corpus has been compromised, it's another fancy way of saying, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَهْجُرْ حَسْبُنَا كِتَابُ اللَّهِ. He is being delirious. The Quran is sufficient for us. No, the Quran is not sufficient. Rasulullah did say, the Quran and my family. The Quran needs a barometer, a person to define it, to explain it, to remove any confusion that might exist regarding the Quran. So go back to the mainstream, follow the scholars of the Ahlul Bayt and no one else, as Rasulullah said in this beautiful hadith. Omar comes to the Holy Prophet. He says to him, Ya Rasulullah, I've been going to this private tutor, this class that is unique. The tutor is a Jewish monk or rabbi, or Rebbe as they call him, and he's been teaching me the Torah. Notice, Rasulullah doesn't tell him the Torah is corrupted. That would have been the easiest thing to do, right? Torah, Injil, the Bible, it's been tampered with, it's been changed. So what are you doing going and studying this book? He doesn't do that. He provides a more fundamental teaching that helps through these confusing ideologies that we find ourselves facing today. He says to him, why are you doing that? وَأَنَا آتِيكُمْ بِهَا نَقِيَّةً. I am giving you the pristine message in its most pure, unadulterated form. And you're going to someone who's teaching you the Torah? Then, as if this wasn't enough, the Prophet adds this point. He said, Wallah, by God, لَوْ كَانَ مُوسَى حَاضِرًا. If Musa was present today, لَمَا وَسِعَهُ إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْخُذَ عَنِّي. He had no choice but to come and learn from me. Musa himself, the authentic Torah. So, follow the mainstream, seek assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and follow the Thaqalain and nothing else.
Thank you, Sayyid. You've given a lot of clarity to the confusion that exists out there. For me as well, you've answered a lot. Inshallah, I hope the viewers find it beneficial.
Yeah, I loved it. Forgive me for picking your brain.
If they do, smash that like.
Smash the subscribe
You know the drill.
Smash it, become a partner.
Smash it, break it.
I'd say just a last thing. Sorry for anyone who's got for anyone who's got to this point in the video. No. On an off-topic point, people, as in if they've got here, they of course respect you. They listen to what you're saying. Can you encourage people to support us? And I mean this because we are.
How can they support you? Can you explain that?
Any financial contribution goes a long way.
Okay.
That allows us,
donations
that allows us to sustain our space.
Do you do like memberships and stuff?
Memberships, merchandise.
Okay.
Business sponsorships.
Okay.
Things like that.
So you got swag I can kind of wear and
I'm not wearing any, but yeah,
to promote the brand.
I mean, on the minbar, the After Maghrib hoodie would look pretty cool, but I don't think that's befitting of the minbar. But no, this is not one of them. But yeah, and that's that. And of course, I think more so just to share our message because we want to reach as many people as possible.
Look, it's not because you're my friends, but it's more so, I think, and I've known you for a very long time, alhamdulillah. But it's because I've seen the impact and I've seen how people all over the world talk about the After Maghrib podcast and the impact it's made on their lives and the benefits that it's brought to them. So I absolutely support the work that you do, and I think everyone else should do so as well. Yes, there are costs involved in making all of this happen. It's no surprise that a lot of podcasts, I think they read somewhere that they stop after like 3 episodes or something. I mean, I tried it once and it stopped after 2 episodes. So part of the reason is that it's a huge commitment. It takes a lot of time and effort, not just by yourselves, the presenters, but Sayyid Mujtaba, may Allah bless him, and the team that puts it all together. So it's something that takes effort and time and energy and also costs money. So anyone who can support, Even if it's a small amount, I would definitely recommend that they do so. And inshallah, it's going to a really good cause. And
Thank you. May Allah bless you,
the proof is on the wall. It says, Ya Hussein.
Yeah,
Ya
Ahsantum.
Hussein.
Ahsantum. Thank you so much,
Ahsantum.
Sayyidina.
Habibi.
And I hope, inshallah, everyone at home has benefited as much as we have. And
Yeah.
inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to always grant Sayyid Mahdi more tawfiq,
Ilahi.
more opportunities to serve, to continue to serve in the way of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam.
Allahumma
This year
ameen.
and every year, inshallah, until his last breath.
Ilahi.
Ilahi, ameen.
To the
Ya
Jameen.
grave
Rabbal
and to
Alameen.
Jannah.
Ilahi,
Inshallah.
Ilahi.
And brothers and sisters, we'll be back as always next week with another episode on After Maghrib. Make sure you comment down below any comments, any questions you have, and inshallah, I'm sure other viewers can try and help you respond. If not, I'm not taking that responsibility, guys. But yeah, inshallah, we'll see you next week. Take care. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.